Hey y'all, I'm Amy here, the founder of the Dog Guide San Antonio, and today I'm here with our guest, Stephanie Garza of Pup and Away. She is our expert resident trainer with all things dog training. She's a certified trainer here in San Antonio, and we are proud to have her as part of our contributor team. And today we are here to talk about how to calm your overstimulated dog down. So, Stephanie, earlier in the pandemic, wrote an article for us, kind of talking on some of the ways that you were seeing dog owners, reflect what their behaviors of their dogs were while they were at home so much. So you saw a lot of different behaviors. Things have shifted a little bit now that a lot of us are back to the office, back to work. What are some of those behaviors that you were seeing from people while they were at home, and have they changed now that they're back in the office more?
Yeah. So as we all know, when the pandemic happened, we're all staying home a lot. So a lot of us actually went to the shelters or adopted dogs, bought dogs. And so luckily my industry was one that always had a nice steady flow. And the one thing that I was seeing a lot in my private training clients was now that we're home with our dogs more, we're around them more, and we're giving them more opportunities to kind of get into mischief, and they're out more, because when we were going to work, we would take them to daycare, or we would put them in a kennel and we'd leave, and they'd have structured sleeping times. What we were doing is, when we were working from home, our dogs are loose with us out in the house. They have more opportunity to be chewing on furniture, chewing on shoes. And now we are in the state of mind where I'm working and I have no time to deal with you. So it's always a quick, give me that, really quickly, not even a redirection, but just a quick response from us, which I saw was leading to our dogs becoming frustrated, and then our humans becoming frustrated. So the humans are becoming frustrated because my dogs are doing X, Y, Z all day long while I'm trying to get work done. And now our puppies, who are now being underslept because they're not having that structured time, but also more opportunity to get into mischief, we're now not properly being guided through how to learn not to chew on those things, and how not to get into that mischief. So we saw a lot of things like puppies kind of throwing temper tantrums and redirecting on owners when they would go to take things out of their mouth. So we saw a little bit of, or I saw a little bit of, minor resource guarding, not in the sense where it was really big and ugly and sent owners to the doctors with, big wounds on their hand. But more of dogs rah, 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 when it was time for me to go to bed, or for me to take this out of your mouth, which kind of led to a lot of different things that we hadn't seen before the pandemic, which was kind of interesting. And then I also kind of noticed that puppies were coming out a little bit smaller from the pandemic because we're not getting as much sleep, which that was kind of my personal observation. I don't know if any other trainers would agree with that, though.
Yeah. So how have you seen some of those behaviors shift now that people are back in the office more?
I'm seeing two different things. One, now that people are going back into the office, it's like, okay, I gotta do something with my dog because I'm going to work. And these dogs were under socialized because we were in the middle of a pandemic, and it wasn't safe for us to be going out and chatting with people and meeting people and taking our dogs to meet people. So we actually saw a really big influx of people who were wanting to send their dogs to daycare, but they were having a really hard time adjusting, not only to staff members, but to new dogs, to new environments. And so at our facility, we do a 2-day orientation for any new person that's going to come in, so we can evaluate their dog. And we actually saw a huge influx of what we call a play and train. So our play and trains are our services that you drop your dog off for the day, and they can't make it straight into daycare completely on their own, so that we pair them up with a trainer to help them through different things. And a lot of them was just pure fear. We're trying to get these dogs into our groups, and our groups are really small. Our groups are no more than 12, but usually fluctuating closer to 8 to 10. And these dogs were going into daycare groups, and you can just tell they were so uncomfortable. So it was a lot of work for us to get them into the groove of meeting new dogs and new people and new environments. The other thing that we saw was still kind of on the overstimulation, because we went from, because I'm working at home and maybe I don't need my dog to go to daycare. So maybe they are spending more time on, a chiller level. And then we take them to daycare where there's a group of dogs and people and all these things to kind of overstimulate them. So the other thing that we saw was dogs coming in and cracking out on daycare, and they're just like, oh my God, this is so exciting, the best day ever. And now we have over arousal that we need to calm down. So once again, pairing them with the trainer so they can learn, like, you can step into daycare and not have it be fun. I mean, it should be fun, but it shouldn't be over the top fun. So
Yeah.
those are the two things: fearfulness and still over arousal.
Gotcha. Cool. So you have some tips for us to help us with managing some of those behaviors in our dogs. So originally you shared 5 tips, and we might have some more in there as well, but I'll go through them and you can tell us a little bit more about them. So first one, you talked about proactively rewarding our dogs. What does this mean and why is it a good thing?
So if you think about it, we're always really good at telling our dogs not to do something, right? Which always gives our dogs attention. And the one thing that our dogs want the most, probably besides food, is our attention. So if our dogs are doing things and turning on my on button, I'm constantly giving them attention, they're realizing, like, oh, this must be a good thing, right? So instead is catching our dogs in the moment of when they make a good decision to not bark at the mailman or not bark at the sound that they just heard, or you see them about to chew on the furniture and they decide not to really be proactively rewarding them for making the good decisions and not waiting until they make a bad decision to redirect or punish that decision. So it takes a lot for us to kind of retrain our brains just a little bit, because when our dogs are doing the inappropriate things, of course, it's always going to get our attention. But when they're being super nice and quiet in the corner, that's never an attention causing a thing for them to do. So it takes a little bit of time for us to kind of get used to it. But when you start to tweak your brain and tweak your training management that way, you will definitely see your dog do more of those things, because the thing that drives behaviors are positive consequences. So if I continue to put positive consequences to the nice, boring things, those will happen more than when I'm giving. And people are like, but I'm getting mad at my dog. Like, shouldn't they not enjoy that? Our dogs love us so much, they're happy for any sort of attention. So making sure that even if I'm yelling at you and saying, no, stop, leave it, that's still our attention to them and it's still reinforcing. So if we're constantly accidentally putting those positive consequences to those inappropriate behaviors that we don't like, that will continue to drive those behaviors to continue.
Gotcha. That makes me think about like, how is your dog, like, if you don't want your dog to bark at the mailman at the window and they don't do that and you reward them for that. I mean, I guess, the mailman is a very specific thing that maybe they could tie that to, but if it's, how are they connecting the dots with, oh, I'm not doing something that I sometimes do that I get attention for? Like, how is that kind of reshaping and reconnecting and rewiring their behaviors and making it connect for them?
Yeah, so the actual technical term is differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors. So that means that we are trying to reward other behaviors for your dog doing something that they can't be doing at the same time. So a lot of the time we're building the good behaviors, not in the moment of the trigger or the stimulus that constantly makes your dog bark, right? We set the stage, we set the foundation for those incompatible behaviors and training scenarios. And then we work up our level to the point where they can do the different things that we do like, even when that trigger, that stimulus is present. And so it definitely takes a lot, especially for people who like live in apartments, right? When you cannot control the stimulus of the different sounds that's going on. And it sometimes it takes a little bit of extra management, meaning doing things like playing music for your dogs to kind of help drown out the noise, or putting them in a different room, blocking off the window. So in a big nutshell, it's not a super easy thing. There's lots of different puzzle pieces that kind of have to go into the big puzzle before we can get to the pretty big puzzle.
Nice. Awesome. Okay. So tip 2, you talked about practicing hyping your dog up. That sounds like the opposite of what we're wanting to do. So how is that beneficial? What does that do?
Yeah. So I really like this exercise, especially for my young kiddos who are lacking some impulse control, because it's one thing for your dog to do a sit and a down and a leave it and a place bed when they're in training mode, right? You've gotten your treats, you have your treat pouch on your hip, like they know, like, it's training mode. I'm going to do all the things. But what's then happening is our dogs are lacking the ability to do those simple manners when it's not a training scenario, right? So things like when you come home for the day, they're super excited, or we're letting them out of the kennel in the morning, or someone just came over, or going for a walk. So one, that's generalization. We have to teach our dogs how to do those simple manners in all of those different environments and contexts. But then also we have to think about the state of mind that they're in. Training brain is like, I'm in working mode. All of those different excited times, they're already mentally aroused, and we're having to practice bringing them down, which is what a hype up, settle down does. It also allows for us to put the behavior, if we're super careful with this, and it's kind of hard to do, but if we're super careful, we can put the behavior of getting excited on stimulus control, which means I can teach my dog it's only worth getting excited, and I'll only like reinforce that behavior and reciprocate that behavior if only you did it after you were invited to get excited. So when you do a hype up, settle down exercise, I recommend, number one, having a hype up cue. Let's play, go grab a toy, let's get crazy, something like that. And then grabbing the toy or whatever it is that you want to be having with your dog, and actually get them really excited, like run around the room with them and jump up and down and do all kinds of crazy stuff for about 5 to 10 seconds. And then literally out of nowhere, stop, calm yourself down, ask for a sit. If your dog knows multiple behaviors, do kind of like a Simon Says thing. Maybe sometimes you settle your dog into a sit, sometimes into a down, sometimes into a place bed, sometimes into a rollover, just to kind of keep your dog's brain engaged. But that allows us to get our dogs into that mental arousal that they sometimes see in real life scenarios, and we practice coming back down. So a couple ways you can also advance this, because maybe you try this out and you're like, oh man, that was super easy. The longer you hype your dog up, the harder it is for them to come back down. And then you can also throw in a couple of different extra rules. The first one would be no jumping, and then the second one would be no mouthing. So while you're playing and while you're in that hyped up mode, if your dog breaks one of those two rules, what I would do is stop immediately, ignore them for a couple of seconds, walk away from them, which is sometimes easier said than done, depending on how aroused they are. But basically what happens is there's an immediate consequence of this game is over when you act like that. But then the biggest thing here too is a very short amount of time. So ignore them for a couple of seconds, wait for them to calm down, and then play again, because it's the repetition that's going to allow your dog to realize, oh, it's when I jump on her that the game is over, right? They're not thinking like, oh man, I really messed up, I shouldn't have jumped up on you. Now we're never going to play this game again. They're not thinking that. So having that nice constant repetition, maybe about 4 or 5, 6 times within the play session, is really important. And because it's almost like HIIT training, like, personal training, we get really escalated and then we come back down. We get really escalated and we come back down. So I definitely noticed that when we play about 8 to 10 reps of this with our dogs, it not only tires them out mentally because we're in a training mode, but we're also tiring them out physically as well. And then you'll start to see them being able to calm down quicker. They still might get escalated in those situations that do cause excitement, but you'll see them being able to, oh, okay, I know how to sit right now because we've practiced this. So you'll see them being able to redirect into those incompatible behaviors that you want a little bit quicker.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I think that kind of goes into the next tip. You talked about conditioned relaxation exercises.
Yeah, I love this exercise for a couple of reasons. And it kind of goes back a little bit to the first tip a bit, where we're finding value in doing nothing. Because if you think about it, whenever we're in training mode, we're always asking our dogs to do a different something. So much so that when your dog is in training mode and you're not paying attention, you see them sit, you see them down, you see them roll over, you see them sit, you see them give a paw. Like, they're always constantly are doing things because we have taught them doing things is valuable. Doing things will get you stuff, right? Doing certain things. So one, it does that. Two, it also trains your brain a little bit to be more aware of your dog when they're doing the nice, quiet things. But three, it also allows for some critical thinking. It allows for your dog to start making their own decisions without you having to tell them what to do. So in order to do this, if you've never done a conditioned relaxation exercise before, start off doing this maybe after a walk when your dog's kind of a little bit tired, not, at your dog's zoomy time or anything like that. Grab some treats. Don't have them in a plastic bag or something that's going to make noise. So either have your treat pouch or have a little dish next to you. Sit on your couch. And if you want, you can even have your dog on leash. And literally all you do is sit there and you wait until your dog makes their own decision to move closer to a state of relaxation. So if your dog is standing next to you and they're looking at you for treats and they're looking at you for treats and they're looking at you for treats, you just simply ignore that. If they decide to sit, thank you, go ahead and treat that. If they stay seated, go ahead and treat that maybe 10 seconds later. If they decide to go from a sit to a down, we treat that. So they're making their own decisions. We're not telling them to do those things, and they're finding value in doing nothing. So you're treating for getting more relaxed and then for staying in that state of relaxation. If for whatever reason they decide to get more aroused, so they go from a stand to a sit or a stand to a let me stare at you for treats again, we just ignore those behaviors. And so once your dog gets good at that, then you can start generalizing that exercise by doing it in the backyard, in the front yard, at the park, at places where you normally find that your dog starts to get over aroused, because once again, that's your dog finding value in doing calm behaviors versus getting excited.
Nice. Awesome. Okay. Crating and rest times for your dog.
Yeah.
I know I've heard some people, especially when they are going to work, talking about feeling guilty about leaving their dog and giving them crate time or times away from them. Why is crating and rest times a good thing for your dog?
Yeah, one, it's a safety issue, right? So a lot of times our dogs are not ready to be left alone for long periods of time. It could be a great potty training technique as well. But kind of like what I was saying before, when we were staying home more and we were overstimulating our dogs, it was because they weren't getting that proper rest. So dogs are crepuscular animals, which means that they are most active at dawn and at dusk, which kind of goes back to their wolf days, I guess, when it was more advantageous for them to hunt when it was cooler and darker. And our dogs still kind of carry that, which is why a lot of my clients come to me and tell me my dog gets the zoomies at like 8 o'clock evening time. It's still kind of hardwired in them for whatever reason. Left to their own devices, our dogs will sleep a big chunk of the day. So sometimes I own a doggy daycare. I'm like, I should take my dogs to work with me every single day. One, that overstimulates them and gets them tired, but two, when they're here at home and I watch them on the camera, they're sleeping. It's always our guilt that kind of gets in the way of that, because we don't take into account what dogs truly do on their own accord, which is sleeping and resting. So even if you are still staying at home with your kiddos, I think it's a great idea to still give them those structured rest times. To tell, like, it's kind of like putting a child down for a nap. If you don't do that, they get cranky. And it's important for their development. It's important for their mental state, just the same way it is for our puppies. Just because they have 4 legs and they're furry does not mean that they still don't need that for them. So I always recommend having an appropriate size crate. Hopefully you've done some crate training. If not, that's a whole nother thing that we can talk about at a different time. But also having your crate in a different room, because our dogs, I know my dogs for sure. I get up to do something. They're like, what are you doing? Where are you going? What's going on? And so even if you pick up your coffee cup and put it down and your dog's like, is something happening? That's even us still overstimulating our dogs. So putting them in a different area, and it doesn't have to be long periods of time, especially if you're still home with your dogs. You don't have to be doing it for 3 hours. Put them in there for about 20 minutes or so, even if it's with a Kong or a bully stick or some sort of long lasting chew, just to give them some downtime, so that we were making sure that we're not accidentally overstimulating them in other areas.
Nice. If somebody doesn't have the option to put the crate in the other room, is putting a blanket over the crate a good option?
Yeah, some dogs do really great with that. Some dogs do not. Some dogs will choose to grab it and pull it in. So it just kind of depends. Other things that you can utilize are things like essential oils, or Adaptil makes like a diffuser spray of pheromones that you can put next to the crate, or just kind of different things like that. And if you're still in the camp of like, but I feel really bad about putting my dog, make it Disneyland in there for them. Like I said, put some blankets in there. Put some treats in there for them. Once they eat it, they'll probably settle down. The bully sticks, the Kongs, different things like that.
Nice. Awesome. Okay. Tip number 5, how does practicing leave it techniques help with your dog's overstimulation?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I saw with, especially with my puppies or my young adolescents throughout pandemic was, I now have access to furniture a lot more than I used to because now I'm out more. And so that led to, okay, now I'm taking things away from my dogs constantly, which led to the frustration. So instead, teaching your dog a cue or a word that tells them, I need you to drop it right now. So that way it's less of a fight. It's less of an opportunity for you to build frustration. But when you run through the leave it techniques, you also teach your dog, one, when I ask you to leave it, I have something of equal or greater value for you, right? So once again, finding value and leaving the thing that I really want the most. And then two, it also teaches them that sometimes just because I asked you to leave it doesn't mean you're not going to get it back. So doing things like that in like a structured tug of war game or something like that, where you have their toys, you're sometimes asking them to leave the toy, but then you're giving it right back to them, helps your dog realize, oh, she's going to ask me to leave it and she's going to take it away from me. I got to keep it forever, So it helps build value and, okay, I'm willing to give this to you because you probably have something better for me, or I might get this back. So leave it techniques are really important to teach our dogs, and also kind of creates a lot of impulse control as well, because you're putting your dogs into situations where usually how we do it is like we put food in our hand and then we hold the food open. And when your dog goes for it, we close it, they back up, we close it, leave it, and doing things like that. But when they choose to leave it for a small amount of time, then we go ahead and reward that. With repetition, we build up some duration. So we're teaching our dog impulse control of, just because you see something that you want, it's better for you to leave it alone, because then that's when I'll give it to you, versus just grabbing things from my hand or grabbing things off of the floor.
Awesome. Thank you. So those are our main 5 tips. Stephanie, you said you had a couple other things to share for helping dog owners calm their dog at home. What are those things?
Yeah, so one of them was food puzzle toys, and I brought a couple of them out to show you guys, because whenever we're talking about overstimulation, it's usually because we're not emptying the energy well in other appropriate ways. So all of our dogs are bred for a specific reason. Even our mutts, when they're mixed together, they got a couple different working dogs in there. So physical stimulation like walks and runs and fetch are really important, but also tapping into that mental stimulation, because when we fail to do one of those things, that's when we have the energy to become overstimulated. So I pulled a couple of my favorite food puzzle toys for you guys to see. My recommendation to all of my clients is throw away the food bowl, and you should feed every single meal out of some sort of food puzzle toy. It really allows your dog to work for their food and slows them down as well if you have a vacuum cleaner. So I pulled a couple. This one is my most favorite, and it's called the Bobble-Lot. And I really like this one. It's kind of similar to the Kong Wobbler, if you guys have ever heard of that. It looks like a Kong, but it's actually just like way bigger. But this one's adjustable. So you have different activity levels on here, because this door right here is adjustable to your different kibble size, as well as, let me see if there's any, there might be food in here. You have this little chamber in here. So what I do is I put the majority of my dog's kibble in here, and then save a little bit up here at the top. And then also this window is also adjustable as well. So you can kind of change the activity level. And then what happens with this, it's kind of like one of those old school, like, I think it was like Bozo the clown balloons that you punch, falls down and it comes back up. So it's kind of the same thing. It's weighted down at the bottom. You push it, it pops back up, and food comes out. I really like this one because it has different, like I said, you can manipulate how hard it is. For my kiddos that are pretty advanced, I also like the Magic Mushroom. This is by a company called Pet Safe, and they make a ton of different brands. A ton of different, Busy Buddy is what it's called. And I really like all of their toys. But this one's kind of similar to the Bobble-Lot in the sense that there's a bottom reservoir of food and they have to get it to come out. But when this guy sits on its own, it has a tendency to roll. But what you want to do is make this guy flip. So if you have a kiddo that likes to pick things up and toss it, this might be a really good fun one. And this one's also adjustable. So these are more like ball style ones where your dog really has to manipulate and kind of move the thing. But we can also be pretty simple and do things like snuffle mats. I made this one myself for a whole $3. I went to the dollar store, bought those plastic sink mats, and then went to the fabric store and got some fabric, cut it into strips, and then you weave it through, and then you tie it, and you can make pretty patterns if you want. You can make it nice and fluffy. But this, you simply just sprinkle your dog's food and kind of bury it in there, and then just have to sniff it out. So that one's pretty fun, pretty easy. And then of course you have things like your tray style ones, something like this. This is a Nina Atosin puzzle. It's supposed to have little plastic bones that sit right here in between the two. So your dog has to take the bone out to be able to even be able to slide these over. And they have a bunch of different like advancement levels on this too. So if you have a beginner dog or you have an adult dog or excuse me, a really advanced dog, you can kind of get pretty playful with that. But you can DIY a bunch of different stuff too. Even if you were to get like a cardboard box, you know, we're going to be doing a lot of shopping for the holidays pretty soon. So save your Amazon boxes, utilize one as your food toy or your food box and kind of put a whole bunch of different boxes in the living room and watch your dog kind of go sniff them out. So mental stimulation and kind of giving your dog an appropriate outlet for that energy is really important.
Awesome. Love those, especially the DIY one.
Yeah.
That's right up my alley. I'm wondering, I guess you probably just throw that one in the washer? Is that pretty easy?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can definitely just toss it into the wash. The plastic, it's pretty durable because it's, you know, it's meant to be living in a gross sink.
And you paid $3 for it.
A whole $3. Yeah, and it was fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for those wonderful tips. You guys be sure to check out the original post. I'll put the link in the comments, or you can go to the website and find it on there. Just search for how to calm a dog down. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you found this valuable. If you have other dog training related questions you'd love to hear about, let us know. Otherwise, stay tuned for our next Trainer Tip Tuesday. And thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.